All right, we're getting going here, guys. So feel free to, as we're going here through the whole program, if you have questions as we're going, I mean, typically we have like 10 to 12 people like in the program, which is nice because we're able to just answer questions and interact. So feel free, if I'm explaining something, if you have a question, to use the chat bar, just let me know. We'll have some time at the end to answer questions as we're going along. And then I just make myself available as well if you want to ask me questions later, or just reach out to me just through my email or Facebook, or however just makes the most sense. Feel free to ask me any question. So, all right. Oops. So yes, I'm John Mark Chesney, physical therapist, owner of Simply Physio, a single location clinic in Knoxville, Tennessee. 3 kids, my wife. Left my wife to do bedtime. We got kids 8, 6, 10, 8, and 6. So they're giving some of their time away from me or me from them so we can do this course. But I'm excited to give it. I really love giving you guys the tools, and hopefully just another tool to improve your success and just add some value to your clinic and to your patients as well. So the summary of today's lesson. So we're going to go over just the course overview, just a little bit of housekeeping stuff, so that way you know how to navigate and access the materials and the resources. Then we're going to just go over just an overview of RTM. We'll get into more specifics about the codes, how they're defined, some revenue questions, frequently asked questions, and then we'll finish with a case study. So today, I'm doing this course a little bit. This is the 4th time I've done the course. So I'm doing it just slightly different. So we're doing it all in 2 weeks. In the past, I've spread it out a little bit longer, and I found if we just kind of keep going through, that we can maintain the momentum. So there'll be the second class this Thursday, and then next week the same schedule, Tuesday and Thursday. The last lesson for sorry, that should be Thursday. We'll wrap up next Thursday. There we go. And all classes, same time, 8:30 Eastern time, and we'll be using the same Zoom link as well for all 4 of the class. So there's a membership site. So the membership site has the recordings. So if you're watching the recording, if you're not able to get on live, or you want to review anything, currently, if you access the site, the recordings are just from the last class I taught in September, October. So most of the material will be pretty much the same. There's always just whether there's updates in our team information or things that I change. So there's always some updates in the material, but 90% of it, if you watch the recordings, would be the same that's on the site right now. So the membership sites, I'm gonna just pull this up over here. So you guys should have gotten, once you signed up, you should have gotten an email that was sent pretty much immediately with your access code. So if for some reason you didn't get that, let me know, but that should have already been sent out. So this is what it looks like. And then once you go inside, of course, you'll see just a little welcome. And then we have the 4 lessons. I know a few people already started just watching some of the lessons. And again, this is the lessons currently are from the cohort, but as this is recorded, I'll drop this into the course and also email out just a replay of it as well. So that's available to you for future cohorts too. If you wanted to just see the most up-to-date course, then you can access your membership site there. All right, and just some important notes. I'm not an attorney or a legal expert. there's rules and regulations concerning RTM that will likely change in due time. This course is not intended to and does not serve as legal advice or as consultative services, but it's really for general information and purposes only. So I really recommend to consult with a legal expert if you have legal questions. My responsibility to you is one is if you are seeking expert guidance on compliance from rules and regulations, I've got as much information as I can to understand from Rick Awanda, probably a little bit more so with RTM stuff, but Rick and Nancy are two just sources available if you need more detailed information on what this course is intended to do. But I am not a billing, coding, or documentation expert. I can only share really my experiences and resources that I've accumulated for you and showing you just what I've learned and how we've incorporated this into our clinic. Everything I share is based off of published information. When it is my opinion, I'll preference that. So you guys know that this is more my opinion. So why this course? So being a physical therapist, and I anticipated a lot of you guys are in small businesses, or if not a business owner yourself, but it's a lot of hard work. I was talking to somebody who was a almost retired therapist. She was in her 60s, and she was like, "Oh man, isn't it pretty hard having a business?" And I told her it is, but it's also rewarding. So, and this is teaching this class is a piece that I enjoy doing too. But it's because just RTM has enhanced our clinic, and I hope it really does the same for you guys. But it's allowed us to grow our revenue and profit without having to get more leads, marketing, spend more on finding patients and investing in equipment, or recruiting more staff. Ultimately, most of you guys are probably already doing a lot of the RTM work. You just don't know how to put it all together so that you can actually bill for it. And really that missing 10% or so of the extra work to legitimize it into RTM. But our Medicare, they keep having some cuts. Ultimately, RTM is legislation that's been passed that's pro-therapy. Is something that we can use to help mitigate that some of those cuts, if not even go above and beyond what those cuts have done to us as a profession or as just individuals as well. So, and I really want other practices to be successful, and that RTM, I see that it can add a layer of success to your clinic. Me personally, so I've watched, paid for RTM trainings, anything that I could find. When I was really starting off, this is late spring of 2022, as I was just hearing more about RTM, just started investigating it, and I found a lot of information, and a lot of information that was not complete information. Some information that contradicted each other, and so I had to just sort it out myself. It did take some time to figure it out. And ultimately, I figured that a lot of other PTs are in the same place of having to kind of sort through somewhat of the mess of the information to try to implement this. And so I want to just design the course so that it simplifies that process to fast track you guys into having just fully implemented RTM practice. Hold on one second, guys. Let me grab my water. All right. And if I had implemented, so we really started getting going late spring, early summer. So if our team was something that was eligible for all PT practices at the beginning of 2022. So if I had implemented it earlier, there was likely just some additional revenue that I missed out on. But now that I hope with you guys that you guys aren't missing out on that extra revenue that you can have. So I really want to just simplify this process for you and give you the fast track to helping get our team up going your practice, so that this even the fee for this course is easily paid for with just getting this going sooner rather than later. So why was RTM developed in the first place? So just a little bit of back history. It was ultimately an expression from, sorry guys, I got just like this little cough, and occasionally I get like a kind of frog in my throat. And so I got my water. Hopefully it won't bother me too much here. Might just sip on my water just to keep that down if I cough here and there. But all right, so yeah, it was developed out of COVID ultimately, and giving us a tool to utilize for remote delivery of some level of healthcare. So the purpose of it is to better assist your patients remotely, and recognizing that there is a need that we can provide services remotely. And thankfully, CMS, Medicare has recognized that it is of value to their patients, and that it should be something that's covered by Medicare. So how is it different from telehealth? So telehealth is the delivery of, in most of our cases, physical therapy, right? So again, telehealth is you're using a video platform to take somebody through an exercise, a therapy session. So that's something, that you may have done, or that you're doing. RTM is not delivery of remote a physical therapy session. So they are very distinct in the two. They both are done remotely, where you don't have to have the patient in front of you. Is the similar parts of RTM and telehealth, but ultimately RTM, for our purposes, will involve how we assist the patient and monitor and updates their home exercise program. So there is something called remote physiologic monitoring that's been around a little bit longer than RTM. So we'll talk about just those differences just briefly, if you do see that, just so that you're not confused between the two. All right, so this sheet, let me, hold on 1 second, let me see. All right, go past it. Okay, so let me, this might be in the PowerPoint, but so all you guys will have access to this RTM monitoring resources and links. Send this out in an email just with the replay of the video of this recording. So you'll have access to this this document, but the first link in the document is what I call the cheat sheet. So that is what you're seeing here. So we'll get into, actually it's this next one right here. So this is something that I'll refer back to, and it's helpful to have as far as a reference guide for when you're sorting through the different codes. All right, so we're going to get into more specifics, understanding of these codes. And so I have these broken down into more specifics here in later slides. The number amounts here, as far as the reimbursement, it will vary based on your region. So just keep in mind that it should be something that's in this ballpark, but it will vary based on where you are, and ultimately your MAC and your jurisdiction with Medicare, as far as Medicare. But the first code is 98975, which is the initial setup and education. It's a one-time code per episode of care. And then 98976 is the device supply for respiratory. So I don't, there's not any respiratory therapist on here. Go talk in the chat bar. I'd love to hear if we have speech, OT, PT. So type in the chat bar. I just want to kind of see who we have here on. All right, so I'm seeing a lot of PTs, really just PTs right now. Okay. So our team is something that is able to be delivered PTs, OTs, and speech. But there is a respiratory code here as well. So 98977 is the code that we would use as PTs, OTs, and speech for the supply of the device. And it's sent out once every 30 days as you're eligible to bill for that service. 98980 is the first of the 2 time-based codes. And this is once per calendar month. And 98981 is when you accumulate the second set of 20 minutes per each calendar month. So these are a bit different. So we're going to get into more specifics about these codes here. But this is what I call a cheat sheet. And it's helpful to reference when we're going through the case studies, or you're having to sort out which codes have which requirements. So for instance, the first code is the requirements. The main requirements around is one, it's 1 time per episode of care, and it's after 16 days. You're only eligible to bill for it after 16 days of monitoring or data transmission. All right, we do have an OT also, and at least one OT. Okay, so 98976 and 98977 is the device supply. Again, us as PTs and OTs, we use 98977. And so I refer to this code as, consider it like the Medicare is paying you for you to issue out the software, and it's the rental fee for the software for a 30-day period. And so it's called the device supply, but sometimes I refer to it as like the rental of the RTM software. But we're able to issue out a bill for this every 30 days, as long as 16 days of monitoring or data transmission has been met during those 30 days of the device supply. And then again, we have the 2 time-based codes that are based off of 20-minute segments. So this is different than our typical 8-minute rule for Medicare, where we have to meet 20 minutes before being able to bill out 98980. 98980 is a 1 time per calendar month, and any additional 20-minute segments you get with a patient, you'd be able to bill out 98981, and you can bill out 98981 multiple times per calendar month, where 98980 is just 1 time because it's just considered for the first 20 minutes. All right, so then I have these broken down more specifically into each of the codes. So 98975 is the initial setup and education. So reading here what it covers, it's the remote therapeutic monitoring of the respiratory system status, musculoskeletal system status, therapy adherence, and therapy response. It all has to do with the initial setup and the patient education on the use of the equipment. So how to use the CPT code is report this code once per episode of care, and only if there's monitoring that occurs for a period of at least 16 days. So you want to use this code to report the initial time spent setting up and teaching the patient caregiver how to use this device. So you'll meet the initial setup and education part typically on your initial evaluation. So that's when you're introducing to the patient the software and how you'll be using it, and giving them just education on just that initial understanding of how they need to log in and check off an exercise. And whatever software you use, it's going to be a little bit different. But the initial time spent to educate them is what goes into this this code here, 98975. The one caveat with it, though, is you cannot bill for it until the patient reports at least 16 days of data transmission or monitoring. So you can satisfy the initial setup and education, but you have to wait until the software is utilized at least 16 days for that data piece. And until that is met, you're not able to bill for that code. So 98976 and 98977 is the device supply. Again, think about this as like the 30-day rental period for the software. This also has the requirements that you have to meet 16 days of monitoring or data transmission to qualify for charging the device supply to Medicare. So that is every 30 days. And this is where it can start to get a little confusing, is 98977 is based off of a 30-day period. When we go to the time-based codes, which are 98980 and 81, is these two codes are based off of a month, a calendar month. And so it can get a bit confusing remembering what is tied to what. It's not that complicated, but initially starting off, you'll just get confused. And so that's why having this as a reference, you can look to see which one is a 30-day period, which one has the 16 days of monitoring tied to it, and which one's is based on the calendar month. Again, this is, you can have the PDF of this in the resource guide that you'll get in the email. Once this is recorded, I'll send that out, and you'll find that that link with the resource guides with all the other links. But the first one is the cheat sheet code. 98980, like we're talking about, this is your first time-based code. So this is as you're accumulating time, monitoring the and talking about their home exercise programs, getting in the app, adjusting the program. All this time you can count towards this code. And this is, again, based off of the calendar month. If a patient has zero compliance and never checks off an exercise, you can still bill for this code because there's no adherence tied to this code here. And the same thing for 98980, which is just the accumulation of 20 additional minutes. Again, this is per calendar month. And this one, you can bill out unlimited amount. So if you got 60 minutes of RTM, the first 20 minutes would be 98980. The second set of 20 minutes, 21, or once you reach minute 40 would be 98980. And once you meet minute 60 would again be 98981. I think I said 98980. So minute 40, minute 60 would be 98981. All right, so that's understanding of the codes. Any initial questions? We're going to transition just a bit, but any initial questions about the codes that you guys have? So what I'll find is if you're not as familiar with the codes and the definitions, that the initial understanding is you'll understand what I'm saying, but then be able to apply it takes just another level of understanding. So that's what we'll use the case studies to help with really cementing of how the codes are applied and when we actually meet the requirements or not. So all information, if you want to read the information of how RTM started and the kind of the legal documents, if you will, so that is right here. And the references to those pages This is where most of the initial information that is really in this course is taken directly from this public information. So you're welcome to reference that and read it yourself. It talks in here about the difference between remote therapeutic monitoring and remote physiologic monitoring. So RTM, which is what we provide as therapists, was based off of remote physiologic monitoring. And so the difference between the two is physiologic monitoring has to do with more what we see here is, I think where I have it here. It must be provided by a physician or a nurse practitioner to be eligible to provide RPM. So again, us as therapists, since we're neither of those two, we don't provide RPM, but that would be more of like if you're checking in on somebody's blood sugar, or they have some sort of trackable heart rates or blood sugar, diabetes type of testing, would be more that physiologic monitoring. Where for us, again, it's therapeutic monitoring based on their exercise programs. So the nature of the data that is collected is really how they define the differences, and then what level of a professional can provide RTM versus RPM. So with RTM, so a few other caveats that were defined in that that public record I was shared earlier, page 357 and 355. It explains how the de minimis does apply to 98976 and 98977. I'm sorry, those two are the de minimis is not applied. 98975, 98980, 98981 is the de minimis, which is the reduction for a PTA delivering the service. Is what the de minimis is, but 98975, 98980, 98981, there is that reduction if those services are provided by a PTA or a CODA. 98977, which is the rental supply, there's no reduction in that fee, and it's not really provided by a therapist or an assistant. It's just that, again, the rental of it. And then another question I get asked frequently is, if I discharge the patient, can I continue with RTM? Is one of the conditions is a therapist, the services must always be provided under a therapy plan of care. So if the patient is no longer under your plan of care, then you can no longer be delivering RTM. So you can kind of adjust some things around that per se. If you did like a delayed discharge, like as long as you haven't done a discharge and there's still a patient, they don't technically have to come back for another visit, that you can continue providing RTM. But once you submit a discharge, then RTM services also finish at that date. So how to determine if RTM is worth your time? So so last month we added $2,300 in revenue. So this is for December. We had approximately, I think, 27 patients, Medicare patients enrolled in RTM. Just for reference for us, one of my students, Dave Candy, he was in my first cohort, and he has a similar size clinic, but they were able to bill out close to $3,000 in their first month utilizing RTM. But it's very reasonable if you were to apply all 5 of the codes, the initial setup, the rental, I guess 4 of the codes, the initial setup, the 30-day rental supply, and then the 2 time-based codes, so 40 minutes of RTM, you'd be around $165 per Medicare patient per 30-day period or per month. So that's, again, very reasonable. If you just look at how the codes are reimbursed, it's a very similar rate to what standard Medicare visits, what you would get for reimbursement, and maybe even a little bit higher. So if you're already at least somewhat satisfied with the Medicare reimbursement rates, then RTM is definitely no worse when you're looking time for time. So, how I calculate this is if 20 minutes of RTM with 3 different patients and you're getting $50 per 20 minutes, then you'd be about $150 an hour worth your time, which is probably a little bit higher than you get with a standard 60-minute 4-unit type Medicare visit. Um, all right. Oh, yes. I have it on here. I think I forgot to mention this when we're going over the codes. Um, so let me mention this right here. So 98980 and 98981. So they're, again, both of our time-based codes. I did not mention, but one of the requirements also is that that you have at least one interactive communication during the month. So that is the main requirement that has to be met for 98980 and 98981 is that interactive communication during the month. So for most of us as therapists, that's not hard to get because you can accumulate time, RTM time, when the patient is there in the clinic with you. So we'll be talking about that here as we talk about kind of how I incorporate RTM into our regular kind of patient. So quick math here of how RTM can really make sense as far as being well worth your time is, again, if we take those first 3 patients and enroll them in RTM and we accumulate 20 minutes with each patient, we are able to bill for the initial setup and also able to bill for the 30-day device supply. Would be about $125 for that 20 minutes of time that we've accumulated with that patient. So if we'd had 3 patients with a little over an hour of your time, you're looking at about $375 an hour, which I would anticipate that most of us would be happy with that exchange rate, especially when we're talking about a Medicare reimbursement rate of $375 an hour. So, the other thing that, will be considered is there is obviously some admin time of submitting bills. And then there is some level of a fee for your RTM software, but still, if you're at $375 an hour, I would anticipate that you have a little bit of buffer room to afford some of that for some admin time and RTM software. But this is where it can really get fun as far as when we consider that to accumulate your RTM time does not require that you have extra time in your day to get those 20 minutes. So this is how we're able to really make it work without having to accumulate a whole separate 20 minutes of accumulated time outside of the time that we already spend with our patients. So for us as a clinic, most of our appointment times, especially Medicare, are on a 60-minute appointment. So typically we would bill out for the expectations is 4 units of service in a 60-minute appointment, right? So, but Medicare, because of the 8-minute rule, is once you spend 53 minutes with a patient, then there's no further reimbursement if you spend 60 minutes versus 53 versus 67, right? You're reimbursed the same amount because you're only able to bill out 4 units. So in essence, Medicare, with how they set up the billing, is as they and almost incentivize you to maximize your time of just reaching that 53 minutes limit, is then you're able to utilize at least those 4 units. So in a 60-minute appointment, in essence, you have an extra 7 minutes of time that you could devote to RTM. Now, let's say you don't even use those full 7 minutes, but let's say you save 3 of those minutes in that 60 minutes for RTM. Over the course of the month, if let's say you had 7 visits with that patient, and each of those visits in the clinic, you had 3 minutes of RTM, then you would have achieved the 20 minutes of RTM without requiring any extra time to devote to monitoring their therapeutic exercise program, their home exercise program. So really that $375 an hour, it's really not kind of fair to word it that way, because the hour is an hour that you have not had to come up with out of kind of thin air. You've been able to incorporate that time by better maximizing your time within the day, and to better kind of disperse those minutes into their appropriate bucket of a CPT code, of a regular therapeutic kind of exercise type code, versus saving some of those minutes for RTM. That's how we get most of our minutes. I would say probably 3/4 of our minutes are minutes that we are able to utilize and accumulate when the patient is in the clinic. And then probably about 1/3 to 1/4 of the time is actually remote monitoring, where the patient is not in the clinic with us, but we're just checking on their program and updating. But other ways, again, that you can maximize your time and bill for it now is because you're utilizing RTM, is again, you don't have to have the patient in front of you. So let's say at the end of the day, you forgot to start somebody's home exercise program and update it or change it, and you're documenting, but now you have to go into their program. You can calculate that time spent changing out their program when their patient is no longer in front of you, that is now billable time through RTM. That happens frequently. How much time are you spending creating, updating their home exercise programs? What if the patient calls to ask to speak to you? So you can have part of that conversation about asking about their program. Let's say they're having some pain, so you start asking about their exercises. What are they doing at home? How are they doing with their exercise at home? What have they, felt? Like, this is all about their home exercise program. This is billable time now on the phone, because you're talking about their exercises and their program that you can bill under RTM, where in the past, that's just a phone call that you would not have been able to bill for that time. So what happens if a patient is in quarantine, if they're on vacation, if they're out of town, even if they're out of state? Telehealth you can utilize, but if they're out of state, you're really, not under your practice act and your license able to provide services out of state. But since RTM is not considered therapy, we can provide remote therapeutic monitoring, even a phone call, and bill for that time, regardless of where they're located. If a patient cancels late, then again, instead of them just canceling and you or your therapist having that gap in their schedule, what we do is we have our admin team who's saying, hey, listen, we know you can't make it, whatever came up. Hey, can I have the therapist give you a call at your scheduled time? They'll want to just make sure that you're doing okay, that you're doing good with your exercises, probably take 5-10 minutes. And again, you can capitalize and reclaim some of that lost time in your schedule that you wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So it ultimately frees up more time that you can bill for. And even if you have, let's say, just an hour where just a gap in your schedule, is you can just pull up and go through the 20, 30, how many patients do you have in RTM? Just go through all their programs, updating, checking in, looking to see how they're doing. And now all that time is billable time, versus in the past, that's something that you would have not been able to utilize. So the other piece to look at it too, and I'll give an example of how it's worked with us at the end of the month, is since to reach that threshold of the time-based codes. So 98980 is, again, that first set of 20 minutes that we have to hit that 20 minutes before we're able to bill for it. Is part of the piece here is you don't want to be 1 or 2 minutes short, because you're if you finish the month at 18 or 19 minutes, there's nothing you can bill for. So if you have a good system of keeping up with your time, And we just had the end of the month this weekend. So we had 4 or 5 patients that were short 2 or 3 minutes, and it was worth my time or a therapist's time to reclaim those minutes so that we can actually find and bill for that time that we've already collected, which again was mostly accounted for within their therapy sessions. But this little chart here is an understanding of if I had, let's say, kind of the top of the graph, the 10 minutes. Let's say I had 6 patients that needed 10 minutes left to reach their 20-minute total. If each time I get them across that threshold is $50, I've taken 6 patients across that threshold. It's taken an hour of my time, and I've been able to bill out $300 per hour. Where most of the time at the end of the month, you may just have 2 or 3 minutes left. But again, if you're able to capitalize on it, so let's use this 2-minute example. So let's say you had 30 patients that were, each of them were 2 minutes shy. Again, that probably wouldn't happen exactly that scenario, but for the sake of the math here, if you had 30 patients that were 2 minutes shy of that 20-minute threshold, if you spent an hour checking off those 2 minutes for each one of those patients, then you would be able to bill out $1,500 worth of 98980. So you just earned $1,500 by spending that hour at the end of the month to get them across that threshold. So that's where keeping up with it can really make a difference of capitalizing on that full time. So this is a scenario that similar scenario that we had over the summer, but this that we had actually at the end of this month. There's 5 patients. One patient was 8 minutes short, one was 3, the second was 3, one was 9, one was 10. So it was a combined shortage of 33 minutes. And they were all short again of getting their 20-minute threshold. And so it was worth the time for me to log into the RTM over the weekend. I think there were 2 or 3 days gap between when the end of the month hit. And so I was able to accumulate the 33 minutes of that combined shortage, and able to bill for that half an hour of work, able to bill out $250. So again, what I'm trying to show is if you're able to keep up with it, it is very well worth your time of adding a nice little revenue stream into your practice. So there's ways that you can even get creative with it. So there could be seasons. So, typically December into January, the season we're at, things can get a little slower. Most people spring and fall, really the volume picks up. So this is a time that you can just devote to more RTM and just accumulate more minutes. Therapist staffing, if you have maybe a bigger clinic, finding PTs can be a hard thing to do to grow a practice. So there is an RTM company that they really delineate themselves is because it's Limbers is the RTM company, but they basically they employ a PT or a PTA to accumulate the minutes for you. So in essence, you outsource your patients to their PTA. They accumulate the minutes so that you can bill for that time, and they charge you a fee for it, but you still get some reimbursed. So in essence, you could do the same thing if you had a large enough staff, is you could have a PT, whether it be part-time or some hours of work, that they're maybe a big chunk of their responsibility is capitalizing on RTM. So again, you can do the same with hiring an extra PT. Let's say you use a PT and then you bring that RTM PT into patient care, but you have kind of that opportunity to fill them with some work utilizing RTM. So just some ways to make up for some time to fill a schedule, if you will, right? Without actually having to fill a schedule with patients, you can start to fill with some RTM minutes. So So we've talked about this already a little bit as far as maximizing reimbursement with a Medicare visit. 98980 and 81 are the two time-based codes, again, accumulated over the course of the month. So these codes are unique because they're not based off of the 8-minute rule. They're based off of an accumulation over a month. So in the past, so we utilize dry needling. We're a hybrid clinic where the only insurance we take is Medicare. The rest is out of network or cash. So with Medicare, when we do dry needling, um, our goal is to still get 4 units and to use about 7 minutes of dry needling. But now instead, when we don't use dry needling, we try to designate some of that time for RTM, so that again we're accumulating the minutes to get to that 20-minute threshold over the course of that month within the patient visit. So, the other piece too is the more we've been using it, and the more we've found that our patients, they really do like it. And it adds a level of value for your patients. And I will say personally that it has changed the way that I even perform a Medicare visit. And I think I really do think it's of more value, when we're designating more time towards the education of their home program. If we're wanting them to have some level of independence and self-sufficiency, of being able to do things more independently, like we have to value that education piece in their home program. And I will say that using RTM has influenced me in that way to emphasize the home program. And I really see that as a value for our patients when we do that. And so to kind of give you a little bit more picture of how I do it with a patient is when a patient comes in, I'm bringing them back to the treatment room. So, the first 2 or 3 minutes, I'm asking like, hey, how have things gone? Tell me about, what's gone on since your last, visit. How have your exercises gone? And then at that point, I'll pull up the software and I'll pull up their exercise program and I'll have them take a look and, I'll say, hey, these are the 2 that we added. How have you been doing with these? Are you having any trouble with those? So we're talking about that program. All that time is RTM time. So that maybe takes 2 or 3 minutes. We get into their session. Maybe at some point halfway through their session, I say, hey, this is an exercise I want to add. Let me go ahead and put it on your home program. Let's watch the video. I can demonstrate it, but here's the video too. So now as I'm showing them that video, again, that's another minute of RTM time. I do that halfway through the session. And then at the end, it's a wrap up. So I pull up their session again, their home exercise program, and then I'm switching the order. I'm saying, hey, we're going to focus on these 3 or 4. I want you to do these daily. I'm putting them at the top of your program. Any questions about these? Here's the 2 that I've added. And then I can pull up the screen that shows their compliance and their adherence. And I can ask them if they've missed days. I can say, hey, I see that over the weekend, it doesn't look like you did any of your exercise. Is that true? Or did you just not go in there and log your exercises? Most of the time they'll say that they didn't log them, whether that be the truth or not. That's usually what they say. And so I just say, hey, listen, for you to get credit, this is a program that Medicare will pay for, is we need to go in there and just log in your exercises because that's how we satisfy those requirements. So I pull up that sheet that shows, how compliant they have been, and then instruct them if they need to go back and give themselves credit for those days, and then we wrap up our session with a high five and make sure that they know when they're coming back. So that's kind of the flow of what I found really works for utilizing, and it's very easy for me to get in that type of flow 5, 6, 7 minutes of RTM time by kind of going in and out, pausing in and out of some RTM minutes just throughout their treatment. So, but I really see it as it gives a level of accountability. Like when a patient sees that we see like that they're getting in their app, that they're adhering to it, that they're doing it, it provides again a level of importance. And when I'm bringing it up, it communicates to them that this is, I find value in this, that I see this as a priority, and that I'm devoting, a good amount of time each visit to talking about it. It puts that priority on that program, which at the end of the day, when we know when they're compliant with their exercises, they're going to get better outcomes. When they get better outcomes, they're going to be happier, and hopefully be more engaged and give us more word of mouth referrals, or just even return back to us in the future. So, a few things. There's investment needed. Really, the main investment needed is having the software. So we'll get into, I think it's lesson 3, is talking more about software options. So, but each of the software needs to be defined, meets the definition of an approved FDA software device. We'll get into more of that, I guess, next Tuesday. But that's really the main investment that you need. It doesn't have to be expensive. There's very affordable RTM softwares. If you want a more bare bones, there's ones that you can pay for more bells and whistles to get a more robust kind of system there too. So there's a lot of different options that we'll talk about in lesson 3. So the other investment needed is just understanding. So that educational investment. So that's what you're doing here through this course. You need to make sure you do your due diligence to thoroughly understand and stay current with RTM, understanding what criteria needs to be met to satisfy each codes, the documentation standards, the billing timeframes, investment in just your internal systems to train your team. So I'll be talking more next session on Thursday about some of our systems, so that you can come up with your own, how to educate your patients, get them to participate, and staying current with any legislation or billing and coding changes. I will say, as far as point number 1, what criteria needs to be met to satisfy each code, is different people and different companies and different RTM software will make determinations of what they count as meeting those codes. And what I would really encourage you guys is, through this course, is that you come to your own conclusion of how the codes are defined and what satisfies meeting that code, and that you don't just defer that to an RTM software company, because I've talked with quite a few software companies, and there is definitely a variance in how they define the codes and how they define meeting the requirements of the codes. So because of that, it's important that you first make sure that their definition, if they're telling you when to bill something, that how they define that is what you stand by. Because at the end of the day, if there's an audit, then you need to make sure that your definition meets what is going to hold true with any type of CMS standards or audit piece with that. So we'll be getting into more of that with some of the case studies where things can get just a bit hairy. All right, guys. So we talked about who can provide RTM services. So for RTM, medical professionals, so which include PTs, OTs, and speech language pathologists. PTs and CODIS can also perform RTM. However, the 3 codes listed there are subject to the de minimis reduction. Administrative staff and support staff are not allowed to provide RTM services. Where that can maybe get in conflict is typically the initial setup and education piece, is recognizing that cannot be provided. If you're billing for the initial setup, that has to be done by the therapist. Now, I would say it doesn't mean that an administrative staff or support staff can't assist with it, but the therapists need to be playing a role with the initial setup and education to be able to bill for the 98975 code. All right, guys. We got about 5 minutes left, so we should have enough time to go through this case study. Each of the lessons will end with a case study to help to start to cement the information that we're going over. So here's the first case study. is we have a 78-year-old male, status post CVA, main complaint is difficulty walking. His diagnosis code right there, difficulty walking, dizziness and giddiness. His eval was on June 10th. The therapist spends 6 minutes educating the patient, setting up the SAMD as software as a medical device, uploading the exercises for the patient, answering questions. 2 days later, the PT logs into the software and spends 6 minutes reviewing, monitoring, the patient's program. The second visit, the PT spends an additional 4 minutes reviewing compliance, asking questions and about RTM and adjusting the home program. 3 days later, the PT reviews the patient's RTM, sees that the patient noted one of the exercises is painful and that they were unable to complete the exercise. So the PT decides to call the patient, spend 7 minutes determining what was wrong and adjusting the program. Again, that's all now billable RTM time. So visit number 3, 3 minutes are spent reviewing the home program, adjusting. 3 days later, and the PT checks remotely, sees no exercise completion from the patient. The PT messages the patient through the software to check in and encourage the patient with completion of her home exercise program for 2 additional minutes. Visit 4 is another 3 minutes of reviewing the home exercise program. Visit 5, the patient had an exposure, cancels the appointment the day of because of the exposure, even though they're not exhibiting any symptoms. The patient wants to self-quarantine. So the PT calls the patient, reviews the home exercise program, is able to advance 2 exercises, the time spent 6 minutes. Visit 6, PT reviews, spends another 3 minutes. 2 days later, checks in remotely, another 2 minutes. Visit 7, 3 minutes. Visit 8 is discharge date. They finalize the home exercise program for discharge, answers all questions, and spends 15 minutes on the final day. So we got a full kind of plan of care here. So we got a summary for you guys. So the eval date was on June 10th. The patient plan of care reached 30 days. There was data transmission and monitoring for the software for 23 of the 30 days. The initial setup time was 6 minutes. And then in June, we accumulated 39 minutes of monitoring. And then in July, there were 15 minutes of monitoring. So at this point, the question is are you able to determine what codes that you are able to bill for this case? So this is where it would be handy to have the cheat sheet, right? Because there's probably a lot of information going on in your head. And without that reference, it's hard to determine what has been satisfied for the codes. So for future classes, when we go over the cases, if you have that cheat sheet printed or handy, it's a nice reference guide to be able to see which codes have been met based on the requirements. All right, so all right, let's go here. So the billing for this case, we're able to bill 98975, which is the initial setup. We're able to bill the CPT code 98977, which is the 30-day rental device or the device supply. And then 98980, we're able to bill the first 20 minutes in the month of June. So that would be approximately $125. If I go back, I'll explain codes. So July, we did not meet the time-based codes because we only have 15 minutes. If we go up to June, we can see that we were 1 minute shy of being able to bill for 98981, which would be that second set of 20 minutes. But because we were 1 minute shy, we can only bill out the 98980, which is again that first set of 20 minutes. The 30-day rental supply, which is 98977, we didn't meet that requirement because we can see there are 23 days of data transmission monitoring. And then the initial education, 98975 is the initial education. we can bill out, because also we had at least 16 days of the data transmission and monitoring. All right, so I see there's a question here. So we're pretty much wrapped up, guys. Let me see what we got here. Do you generally bill the CPT codes with the data service that it was supplied, or can you bill, for example, on the codes that you satisfy? So I'll tell you what we do is that's a good question. Is so can you bill the initial setup for the evaluation day, or do you have to wait for that billing for once you satisfy it? So what we do is we wait until the very end of the month. So it's just kind of just what we find that works well for us, because the codes are the monthly codes. We have to wait till the end of the month. Is we just wait to the very end of the month and see what all codes are satisfied, and then based on that, we bill out a whole month's worth of RTM at that time. That's what we do. So technically, for like 98975, you can't bill that out until you've had at least 16 days for the initial setup. So for, I guess you had a question is for the date of service. So it's not the date of service for the initial setup, right? Because we have to wait at least 16 days. So it would be after when we bill that out. So there's no harm in doing like a delayed submission to Medicare through whatever biller that you use. So we wait until at least all those codes are met, and we don't backdate it to the date of service. We just do it at the end of the month, where we're not running to an issue of billing that service before those 16 days would have been met. But good question. All right, do you keep up with minutes in your EMR or separately? So a lot of the so a combination of the two, Doug. So a lot of the softwares have the ability to keep up with your minutes within the software. Some don't, but we'll be getting into that on Thursday as far as how we do it. So if you don't mind saving that, Doug, that's a great question, but we'll be getting into more of the systems of operation on Thursday. All right, guys, any other questions? I got just a few other kind of points here to wrap things up. So other insurances. So commercial paying insurances, oftentimes they follow suit what Medicare is doing, but that would be something that if you're in network with other insurances, you would have to verify with those individual policies to see if they reimburse for RTM. So Medicare replacement policies. So again, I've been told we're not in network with any Medicare replacement policies. So the one that we bill for that I know is with Medicare. So I've been told that most Medicare replacement policies, again, they follow suit with what Medicare does. But I would encourage you is to verify that with whatever policies that you see, just to make sure that is true. All right, and then so the MPPR so does not apply. So that is the multiple payment reduction. That gets applied for if you have 2 units of service versus 4, there's the reduction. So RTM is not subject to the multiple payment reduction. And then RTM is considered part of the therapy cap. So if you're keeping track of the KX modifier, RTM fees would go into that calculation for the therapy cap. All right. So wrapping up here. So I'll wrap up. I'll hang on here for a few more minutes if anybody has any questions. But just summary. So we'll be on same Zoom link For Thursday, the 5th, same time, we'll be going over communication, how to get patients involved at the highest level, and then some of the systems for documentation and billing that you'll need to have in some of our templates as well. So make sure, again, I'll send out an email to you guys with the resource guide, which includes the cheat sheet, which will be handy for the case studies. And then here is, if you want to jot down the pieces here, we're going to start with lesson number 2 on Thursday, going over this case. So I find the case examples are really helpful for, again, just bringing everything together. So this is just a summary of a case that we'll go over the beginning of the next lesson. So it's right hip OA evaluation on March 1st. The therapist recommends RTM, assigns a program, instructs, answers questions, demonstrates good understanding of the phone app. So there is an accumulation of 21 minutes. This is bullet point number 2. That the patient marks on the exercise as painful. So the PT call spends 21 minutes on the phone going over the exercise, answering questions. And then over the next 30 days, there's data transmission of 20 of those 30 days with an additional 22 minutes of logged RTM time. So we'll be going over the answer to this question at the beginning of next lesson, as far as what can you bill for the month of March. So if you jot that down, again, this will be in the replay, as well as copies of these slides in the resource guide that will be in the email as well. So guys, that is it. Any questions of what we've gone over today that you guys have? I'll respect the time, but also make myself available if there are any questions. And thank you guys for being on live too. I appreciate having people to talk to versus people just catching the recording. I know you can't catch the recording, I get it, but thank you for making the blocking out your time to be here live too. One advantage is you can ask me a question here on the spot to get answered. So so any questions, guys? All right, I'm not seeing anything. Oh, you're welcome, Michelle. No problem. All right, guys, so we'll be back on in 2 days, and I hope to see you guys then. If you need anything before then, just feel free to email me, give me a shout out, and happy to help. You guys have a good rest of your evening. See ya.